Hello everybody, I'm Monica McInerney and welcome to Dymocks Chapter 1, which is about me and my new book, The Godmothers. And today is publication day, September 29th, and I'm really delighted to be here, thanks to Dymocks, and to hopefully talking to lots of you. I wish I could see you. And wish it was the olden days and it was possible to go to bookshops and libraries, but this is the next best thing. So tonight, what I'd love to do is talk to you for about 20 minutes or so about the Godmothers and about the writing process and my research, and show you some photos, courtesy of Tim from Dymocks, who's the magician with the images, and then I'd love to answer any questions any of you might have. So please do feel free to type those in the comments and I'll answer as many as I can. Just to set the scene, I'm in Adelaide. I normally live in Dublin with my Irish husband, and which makes it sound like I have different nationality husbands around the world, but I have one husband who's Irish in Dublin. But I'm one of the COVID stranded. I've actually been in Australia since February and was supposed to fly back to Dublin just as the borders closed and the flights were grounded. And since then, I have been staying with my very patient and welcoming mum here in Adelaide in this spare room. That banner Penguin made for me, and it hides a multitude, let me tell you. And this desk behind me is where I finished the edits and for The Godmothers, and did the proofreading, and I've been living my writer life unexpectedly in Australia. So let me tell you about The Godmothers. This is my 13th book and my 12th novel. And this year marks my 20th year of being published, which is another reason I have this beautiful banner behind me. That's my backlist. And the inspiration for The Godmothers, I write family comedy dramas because I think family life has both of those elements so strongly. I like to write about something very serious and emotional as the base notes, if you like, through my novels, but I also add as much liveliness and humour as I can the whole way through too. The Godmothers, unsurprisingly, is about godmothers. It's the story of Eliza Miller, who's 30 years old, and she has had quite a tricky childhood. And her mum, Jeannie, was a single mum, and they moved around a lot when she was a child. Just before she was to turn 18, which is when her mother was going to tell her the truth about a lot about her life, including who her father was. She doesn't know who he is. A tragedy happens, and that's not possible. And Eliza's two godmothers, Olivia and Maxie, really step in to guide her from that moment. But Eliza has responded very emotionally, obviously, to this event that's happened. She's built herself this small, safe life in Melbourne. And as the book begins, and there won't be spoilers tonight, I promise, she's catapulted out of her safe, secure life and via her godmothers. And she finds herself suddenly in Edinburgh with a long plane trip, which was very strange to edit when such things weren't possible. And she switches her life from being this very, very tight life to suddenly find herself in the middle of a complicated family in Edinburgh and with her godmothers. And so she decides then that she's going to try and find out who her father was. So the story on the surface, I think, is a family mystery, is how I'm thinking about it, that it follows Eliza as she searches for her father and the truth about her mother's troubled life. But it's also very much a book of moral dilemmas, I think. It's a book full of secrets. At every turn, people are keeping secrets. People have been told secrets. People suspect secrets. And the two godmothers in particular, they know Eliza's secrets, but how much should they tell her? And would it be better to tell her nothing? So that's the moral dilemma that faces the main characters. And two family stories in my life actually were the inspiration. The story doesn't take these in, but they planted the seed. And with me, I'm obsessed, fascinated with family secrets, and particularly the sort of secrets that are kept between generations. And I trace that back. When I was a child, my father's half sister, before I was born, in fact, it's the story I knew from childhood. In 1957, my dad's half-sister drowned in an accident, obviously an accident, drowned in an underground water tank on the family farm in northern South Australia. And as a child, I was very aware that when I walked into a room, and if this was in conversation, they'd be in hushed tones, or the conversation would stop if I came in, or anybody else from the next generation came in. And I was a very curious child, and I always thought, there's more to that. Was it a drowning? Was it something else? And I asked my father, and he said no, as far as he knew, that, that's what it was. And my own aunt, who is also my godmother, I always thought she knew more. She would answer, very evasively about it. So I think that's a connection that helps seed the godmothers, the idea of a godmother knowing a family secret and never telling anybody. The second inspiration was a more modern one, and my big sister, who I think is watching tonight, hello Mari, and her oldest friend, Fiona, who I think is watching tonight, hello Fiona. For my sister's 50th, Fiona gave Mari a collection of emails and letters that they had sent to each other through very action-packed time in their lives. And it's a beautiful hardback book. I've only seen the cover, that's all they'll show me. And it's full, apparently, of the two of them discussing in forensic detail in these really long emails about their friends, their families, their relationships. And my sister has made her husband swear that if anything happens to her, the first thing he has to do is destroy that book, because she doesn't want her kids to read it and she doesn't want her siblings to read it, which, of course, makes me really want to read it. But that also planted a seed that, what would kids know or not know about what their parents or their aunts and uncles got up to before the kids came along? So it's those two, like an older story and a younger story, two seeds. And then years later, I started writing the book. But that's what I've traced it back to those two particular stories. So it follows, as I said, Eliza Miller. She comes from Melbourne to Edinburgh, where she finds herself in the middle of this very complicated family where her godmother runs a boutique hotel in Edinburgh. And I'll talk a little bit about the settings. Tim has a photograph, actually, of me in Edinburgh, one of the first research trips. And if you read the book, and which I hope you will, and hope you enjoy it, this is the street that I imagined at the Montgomery Hotel, the boutique hotel that is the setting for a lot of the godmothers. And it's in Edinburgh. It's in an area called Haymarket in Edinburgh. And Edinburgh's full of these beautiful streets full of terraced houses like that. And I got to have a stroll around and choose, I'm going to have those 3 terraced houses as my fictional hotel. And so that's that photo you can see that's the first time I was there having a look at that particular street. So that was one of the settings. Eliza also finds herself visiting different parts of Scotland, and in fact she goes to Gretna Green, which is the famous eloping village on the border of England and Scotland. So for centuries, I think for 200 or 300 years, and Tim has a photo of me there at Gretna Green too. And it was always a place that couples ran away to elope. And I was always really interested in the whole idea of it. Turns up in a lot of Jane Austen novels and things too. So we also went there for a research trip because there's a marriage quite early on in the book, and that's where it takes place. And it was fascinating because it's pretty much like a wedding theme park. I have to say, there's a big hotel nearby, and people go there to have very small weddings, or some runaway weddings still. And so you're just sitting around in like a hotel having a regular dinner, but there's a bride and groom over here and another couple over there, and it's very relaxed. So it's a little bit like, as I said, wedding Disneyland, but really, really interesting. And so there's a chapter in the book set there. And there's also this tradition that when you get married at Gretna Green in this old blacksmith's cottage, there's a blacksmith's anvil. And thank you, Tim. And you can see it there that anvil gets struck, and the noise echoes around the room that you're getting married in. So there's all these kind of fantastic traditions like that. So we got to have a look at that. I was there with my husband having a good look at it. And I thought there were tour groups going around, so I joined a couple of tour groups and stood there and got quite involved in this one particular wedding, which I thought was a fake wedding that the tour guide was putting on to get everybody have a chance to see what one of these Gretna Green weddings were like. In fact, it turned out to be a real wedding, and they asked me to leave because I was being a little bit too interested in what was supposed to be a private wedding. But that's Gretna Green. There's also a section in the book set in London, and there's a theme that runs through the Godmothers. And again, I'm being very careful with spoilers, so I promise that this won't, hopefully affect when you read it. But art and painting and creativity is an important theme that runs through. The book is full of people who are longing in some ways, like they're longing for something that they had and don't have anymore, or they're longing for something that they want that they've never had. And I think in a time like now, like in COVID, we're all so aware of what creativity can bring and how soothing it can be to us all when things are feeling a bit grim and gloomy. And so there's characters that take nature photography and landscape photography. Eliza paints as a solace for herself to kind of calm her mind. She's an anxious person. And her mother, Jeannie, years before had gone to the Tate Gallery as a young woman backpacking around Europe and chose a painting that matters a lot to her, and that then matters a lot to Jeannie. And if you read the book, you would Google it after I mention it in the novel, but here it is. It's this incredibly large painting, as you can see here, and it's called Carnation Lily, Lily Rose, and it's by an American artist called John Singer Sargent. And I did exactly as Jeannie does in the novel. She went to the Tate Gallery in a cold day. She was a young woman, about 19, backpacking in London. And I wandered from gallery to gallery to see which painting was going to be the important painting for me in the book. So it was this beautiful day that I had all the time in the world just to choose it. And so I'm sure a lot of you have been to the Tate, or some of you might have seen documentaries about it. It's just this enormous, and it's gallery that gives way to gallery to gallery. And as soon as I came around the corner and I saw this particular painting, I knew that was my special painting. And so that appears in the novel. And it is so enormous. And Jeannie has this joke that she tells herself that she can buy whatever painting she wants. So she chooses this one. And, the shipment alone would send anybody bankrupt, as you can see just how enormous it is. But it's a very special one. And I was so thrilled that I thought that, I'd never heard of this painting before. And I thought, this is brilliant. I've actually picked a really unusual special painting. So that will make it matter even more that this is important to Jeannie and Eliza. And then I stepped out from sitting in front of this painting and just looking at it for ages and coming up close to it and seeing the detail. It's really an extraordinary light and the flowers and just the glow of it. It's set in like a midsummer's evening, and it's just at twilight. It's just really spectacular use of shades of orange and slight pinks to really make it glow. And I thought, that's great. This is, it's going to be a very special painting to me. And then I walked out into the Tate Gallery shop, and there was this entire wall devoted to souvenirs of Carnation Lily, Lily Rose, which turns out to be one of the Tate's most famous and popular paintings. So you can buy tea towels, you can buy earrings based on the colours, tote bags, everything. So, I bought up big, basically. But if you ever get the chance to visit London again when we can travel and go to the Tate, I really recommend it. As you can see, just the sheer majesty of it. It's a beautiful painting, and it matters a lot in the book too. So my final research photo tonight, just to show you, and again, I can't say too much about it, but those of you that are listening who have read a lot of my books, you'll know that I love to set my stories, obviously, in Australia. This one's Scotland, in London, and also Ireland, where I normally live when I'm not caught up in a pandemic. And I loved using this particular setting, and I'll ask Tim just to show you all this particular photograph. And it's one of my favourite. I love to be able to say this is one of my favourite Irish castles. I can't tell you where it is, and I can't tell you what some of the reasons it's famous, because you'll discover that as you read. But as you can see, that was during a research trip just to visit it, and the majestic winter light. I'm wearing about 3 layers of thermal clothing underneath that very thick coat. But that winter light that you get in Ireland, which just strikes this, this extraordinary kind of the deep green, and then the castle. So if after you've read the book, and you want to find out a little bit more about that castle, get in touch with me via Facebook, and I'll secretly tell you a bit more, but just for now I can't because of spoilers. But so there's just some of my location photographs for you all to see those. It's probably about another 5 minutes, and then I'd love to go to questions if any of you got them. But as I said, just to talk a little bit about the writing process. I don't know when I start writing a book what's going to happen at the end. I know a lot of other writers plot it very carefully, that they know each chapter exactly what's going to happen. I am a writer because I'm a reader, and because of that, in the same way that when I read a book, I never go to the end. I like to turn the pages. I like to be taken by surprise. So when I'm doing the first draft of all of my novels, for me, climbing up the stairs to my attic office, which is where I write, is a bit like turning a page of a book. Like I don't know what's going to happen each time. I always know my characters very, very well before I start writing. I spent about 6 months imagining the family, the lead characters, in this case Eliza and her godmothers, because I wanted to write a book about a different sort of family, that the godmothers are all the family that Eliza has now, and the idea of them being custodians of her secrets. But it's not a blood bond, but it's still a really important bond because it's a chosen role. So I was really interested in that relationship, and I knew that they would have secrets that were really important to Eliza, but I didn't know what those secrets were going to be as I started writing. So if you're reading The Godmothers and you get taken by surprise at anything, it's because I was too. Hopefully if you laugh, it's because I amuse myself very much when I'm writing it. As I said, there's a lot of serious base notes to the Godmothers. It is about grief and grieving and remaking yourself and rebuilding yourself after devastating loss in lots of ways. But along the way, Eliza encounters lots of other characters and supporting cast, and they appeared unexpectedly to me as well, including an 11-year-old boy called Sullivan, who Eliza meets on the flight from Melbourne to Edinburgh, and also her godmother Olivia, who was in the hotel in Edinburgh, she's not her mother-in-law because she's her husband's first wife's mother. So she's like a mother-in-law outlaw. And she's an absolute terrible person, and she was so much fun to write. I like to write people that sometimes they get their comeuppance, or sometimes they learn to the way they're behaving is really wrong. Celine in this novel, she's in her 80s. As I said, she's the mother-in-law outlaw from hell. She's foul-mouthed. I had to cut a lot of swearing out from one draft to the next because she was swearing so much. She says whatever she wants. She doesn't care about other people. She's the most selfish character I've ever written, and I had so much fun writing her. She was really, it was just like letting a demon out. So she is my 11-year-old character who befriends Eliza on the plane and becomes important to her as well as the novel unfolds. So as I said, so you'll meet lots of other people as well as Eliza and her godmothers as she follows this mystery and this set of clues to find out what she needs to find out. So I'll finish up my talk for a little while. I just want to let you know about something else, actually. The other thing I've been writing here in my desk here in Mum's spare room is I've been working on my first children's book series, and that the first of those is going to be published in April next year by Penguin, and it's called Marcy Gill and the Caravan Park Cat. And so I was writing that while I was editing The Godmothers. So I was switching between this big family comedy drama with moral dilemmas and a lot of emotion to a family story for readers 10 and under, which I've absolutely loved writing. It's a whole new skill. It's such a particular set of skills to write for children that I'm still learning, but I'm being, helped so much by my editors at Penguin, and thank you to them. And the fun bit about writing Marcy Gill, my children's book, is going to be a series, is that I've got magic in it. It's got lots of magic ingredients. So it's a family story following a little girl called Marcy and, her adventures with her family. But I was able to use magic, and that is fun. I think I'm going to find that tricky with my adult novel, the next one I write. So I'm in the early stages of my next adult novel as well. That you can solve a lot of problems with a bit of magic. So that I might end up writing magic realism books. I don't know. So just to let you know that as well. And this is where I done the most recent draft of Marsupial. In this desk, which seriously did not look as tidy as it is now. I want to make that really clear. I've completely untidied and set this up to look like this. It doesn't look like this. It hasn't looked like this for 7 months. So thank you for the excuse to tidy it up. So if anybody's got any questions, I would love to answer them. So I think Tim's putting one up, and I have to put my glasses on. Hang on a second. Hello, Anne. Hi, Monica. Do you plan your stories or begin writing and let each story develop as you go along, as you do your research? Pretty much as I mentioned before, Anne, I make it up as I go along. I know that I have a family in the characters, and I'm going to set what I call an emotional explosion off in that group of people, and something's going to happen to them that's going to send everybody often in other directions, often to other parts of the world or cities or countries. But beyond that, no, I let it unfold. I research as I go along, and sometimes that research takes me in another direction, that if I go somewhere I think, oh, wow, this would be a really interesting place for something to happen that I hadn't expected to happen. So there's a bit of that concurrently. That's only the first draft, though. The first draft, I don't, as I say, I make it up as I go along, and it twists and it turns. But I do many, many drafts after that first draft, sometimes up to 10 drafts before I send it to my publishers. And it's those subsequent drafts that I absolutely plan, and I make sure, and I do a lot more structuring, and I make sure that there's, the moods are right, and it's not sagging in the middle, and then there's lots of going on. But the very first draft, when I'm literally inventing the story, no, I don't plan. So thank you for your question. Anybody else? This is so modern, isn't it? I'm amazed. Tanya. Hello, Tanya. I know a lot of these people from Facebook. It's lovely to see your questions. What sparks your interest to begin to write? I'm a writer because I'm a reader. I still love reading. I still read 2 books a week if I can. I started reading as a 4-year-old. I grew up in the Clare Valley of South Australia, and my mum, Mary, is a really, really keen, voracious reader. And I grew up seeing her reading all the time. And I know, I know that from a lot of other studies that I've read, that if kids grow up seeing, the adults in their lives reading as well, that often fosters a love of reading. And then mum also, my dad was a railway station master in Clare. And then mum looked after, the 7 of us until she obviously thought that there must be a quieter way to live your life, and took a job in the local library. And that was really life-changing for me too, that we had after-hours access, and mum was very relaxed about the borrowing limits. So I was able to get lots of books to read. And also, as country kids in Clare, we also were able to subscribe to the State Library of South Australia's country lending service. So once a month, they would send packages of books over to us kids, to Dad at the railway station, and we could go over and get parcels from our own dad, and they would be a selection of books each month. So I know that became they turned books into magical objects for me, I reckon. And so I suppose that, like anything, if I'd been really interested in sport, I might have been interested in being a sports person, though that's amusing myself, the idea of it. But the idea of anything that you love as a child, if you can then try and do it yourself. And so that's how it was for me. I think absolutely being a big reader made me want to see if I could write those kind of stories myself. So thank you for your question. Hello, Megan. What comes first, the setting, characters? With me, always the characters. And sometimes the setting doesn't come until quite a long way, really. And sometimes not even, like, the plot comes next, and then I decide where it might be set. So I always start with a lead character, and I either give them a family, or in the Godmother's case, it's that was the smallest unit possible, was herself and her mum. For Eliza, and then her 2 godmothers, who are kind of her surrogate family. And then I think about what's going to happen to them, and then I think about where are they going to go, where do they live, what do they work at, if I'm going to move that character, where is she going to be, where is she going to go, and that's a fantastic, I love that part of the writing process when I'm choosing the settings, that it feels like the sky's the limit, really. I always make a point of going to every location that I've written about, and only one I haven't in all of my my 12 and 13 books now. In those Faraday Girls, which is my book from some time ago, one of the characters is a scientist in Antarctica, and it was impossible for me to get to Antarctica, and I still kind of, a bit sorry about that that's the one location I haven't been able to go to, because as a child I loved reading about, snow villages and little coves and islands, and Eden Blyton books, and I read Mark Twain, and to read about the Mississippi, and for a kid growing up in Clare, that's how I learned about the world. So I think that is why I have lots of settings in my books. I love, and lots of my books, 5 of my books actually are set in Clare, my hometown, and the Clare Valley. And my novels are translated now into sort of 12 or so languages. And I really love the idea that somebody in Latvia or Italy is reading about characters walking down the Clare main street, in a way that as a kid I read about other countries too. So settings are really important to me, and I love that part of the writing process. Thank you for your question. Hello, Robin. How do you say goodbye to your characters after you've finished a book and been so immersed in them? It is hard, because I do get very, very involved with my characters. I take about a year, sometimes 18 months to write a novel, and then I've had a lot of thinking time before that. And some of the characters don't go, like I don't know if any of you have read my novels about the Quinlan family. It began with the Alphabet Sisters, which is about Lola Quinlan, who's this matriarch Irish grandmother. She's turning 80 in the Alphabet Sisters, and she's decided to bring her 3 granddaughters who have been feuding for 3 years back together. She's had enough of their feud. She wants them back being friends. And that was my 4th novel, and I really loved writing that book. It's set in the Clare Valley, and it was my first 3 books had been romantic comedies. And I realised by the 4th book I was really they're great fun to write romantic comedies, because all your job is to keep the couple apart for as long as you can, and then give them a happy ending. But more and more as I was writing those novels, I realised it was their families. It was the families of the two people that I was really more interested in. So my 4th book, The Alphabet Sisters, was absolutely about a family feud, family jealousy, family love, grief, loss, intergenerational tensions, all those kind of things. And Lola Quinlan was so much fun to write. I couldn't say goodbye to her, and so she turned up again in a book called Lola's Secret, which is also set in Clare, which is Lola, and she sends her family away at Christmas time and gets up to all sorts of hijinks. And then 3 years ago, my most recent novel, Before the Godmothers, was called The Trip of a Lifetime, which is also Lola Quinlan. And I've written a short story about Lola. And during the pandemic, Penguin, my publisher, asked me to write a short piece about how Lola Quinlan would have handled coronavirus and what she would have done. So I've written that, and that's appeared on my newsletters and on my Facebook page too. So that's one character I haven't been able to get rid of at all. And there's a character in The Godmothers, the 11-year-old boy Sullivan. And people, look, it's only publication day, but a few people have read The Godmothers, and people are writing me saying, "Oh, look, I'd love to see Sullivan again." And I wouldn't be surprised if he came back. Some characters, they're just such good fun, or you just think there's more to them. So I wouldn't be surprised if I see him again. So thank you for your question, Andrea. Hello, Andrea. I know you from Facebook too. How are you? She said something very Irish for a second. What genre do you like to read, and what are you reading at the moment? I read all and everything, and I'm thrilled that you asked this question, because I have little pile of books here that I'd love to show. One of the great things about being back in Australia is so many silver linings. I've looked for them long and hard and found so many. including, obviously time with my mum and family and magpies and the ABC News jingle and all these things that I'd forgotten how much I missed. But I've been reading only Australian novels since I got here. So I was voraciously, ordering books from Dymocks, obviously, to read during lockdown. And so I'd just like to share 4 of those. I read, as I said, read as much as I can. So if anybody's, whoops, sorry, I just killed my own book. So this is one called The Application of Pressure. Which way do I go? There we are, by Rachel Mead. And it follows 2 paramedics in Adelaide over 20 years of their career. So it was young paramedics starting out, and then as life goes on. And each chapter is one or the other of them responding to an incident that paramedics have been called to. I love this book. It's so you can't put it down because you're so interested. Like when an ambulance goes rustling by and you think, wonder what's going on. This is how you find out what's going on, and it's the emotional toll on those 2 paramedics as well. Rachel Mead's actually a poet, so you can imagine that it's really beautifully written, really lyrical as well. So and it's great to read a book set in Adelaide too. So I really recommend that. So that's The Application of Pressure by Rachel Mead. For a fantastic unputdownable thriller. I can't do this, can I? There we are. The Bluffs by Carl Perry, debut novelist, as Rachel Mead is a debut novelist too. And this is such a cracker. It's like a roller coaster, and I heartily recommend it. It's you never know what's going to happen next. It's so Tasmanian in terms of the landscape matters so much. The characters, it's got a bit of mythology. It's like a police procedural as well. And I follow Kyle on social media, and the glee he has in his writing, and you can see how much he's pouring himself into it. I really recommend this. It just takes off like a rocket, and you can't clear a couple of days to read that one. So that's The Bluffs by Kyle Perry. How are we for time? Oh yeah, we're good. I love this. This came out, Mini Dark. There we are. Mini Dark, the Lost Love Song, and this came out right at lockdown, and I just felt so sorry for so many authors whose books came out. And I did a series of posts on my Facebook page called "Don't Leave Me on the Shelf" for as many books as I could that came out, just to say, please, if you're looking for something to read, look for these ones. And this is a gorgeous book. It follows a song. It's in the way that I was talking before, that there's a lot of art running through the Godmothers. This is all about music and the power of music. And a song moves from characters in very ingenious and different ways, and follows grief and relationships and love. And it's a really beautiful book. So I heartily recommend that one too. That's Mini Dark, the Lost Love Song. And this final one is called, this is a proof, so the final copy looks a bit different. This is The Last Migration by Charlotte McInerney. I hope I'm saying that right, McInerney. And this is, I think it's called like a kind of it's set in the future. It's a climate novel. Climate crisis has gone beyond even our worst imaginings, and it follows a young, brave, complicated, complex, troubled young woman who decides to follow birds for their life's migration, and she attaches herself to a group of sailors, fishermen, and it's very hard to describe, but it's absolutely heartbreaking. I haven't read anything quite like it for a long time. You need to give it your full attention because of the beauty of the writing, but also the depth of the story, and also it's chilling in lots of ways that you think that please let this not happen to our world. So I really recommend that, just for a really thoughtful. It's an adventure story. I mean, I read a review that kind of likened it to Moby Dick. Now I haven't read Moby Dick, so I don't know if that's true. But in terms of like a big ocean story, so so that would be the one where all Australian writers, and I heartily recommend those. And if I often post on my own Facebook page lots of books that I've read and enjoyed, and so please do keep an eye and join my Facebook page if you want to have a look at other books that I've read and loved. And I also do lots of giveaways on my page, so please do hop on to have a look at those and join in those too. Monica, some Paddy Patrick. Hello, Paddy Patrick. Monica, do you have lists of random ideas, thoughts that come to you for storylines for future books? In New Zealand, hello. I don't write them down anywhere, but I keep them. I keep them in my head. So it's pretty busy in there, in my head sometimes. Particularly when I'm in that thinking stage that I was talking about, where I'm spending a lot of time imagining the characters before I actually start writing, and I'm thinking about who gets on with who and how they approach life, and all the different where they work. What their ambition is, physically what they're like. So all of that, that I do that a lot of thinking with that kind of character building, if you like. And that I find my head fills up with that. And I kind of joke that, that famous interview that Princess Diana did, and she said there were 3 of us in this marriage. And my husband reckons when I'm in the middle of, when I'm hatching a book, there's about 35 people in our marriage, because we're sitting around having dinner and he knows I'm not listening. I'm thinking about my next book. So I don't really need to write them down. They're all kind of there, because that's the beauty of being a writer. It's one of the many, many things I love about it, that it's portable. Daydreaming is what is an essential tool for my job. And so there's always lots of ideas buzzing around. Thanks, Patty. Thanks for the question. Hello, Karen. What other authors influence your writing style and character building? Every single book I read influences me in some way. The 4 novels, the Australian novels I've just read recently and recommended, each of those, I was jealous of all 4 of those. I thought, how did they do that? How did they make me want to keep turning the pages? Why did I care so much about those characters? So everything I read, I didn't do a writing course before I started writing. I learned to write by writing. I learned to write by reading. And that's still the main way that I write now. I read it, like if I can't put a book down, I read it as a reader, and then sometimes I read it again, actually, to think, how did they do that? How did I care so much? Was it fantastic chapter endings? I couldn't put the book down, had to keep reading. And more recently, actually, I can't get it, because I know if I stood up and get this book, I'll knock the banner down and it'll just be all disaster. But I recently have read The Age of Innocence by Edith Wharton, the classic book set in kind of society in New York. And I couldn't believe it. It was like a masterclass in writing. And I marveled at that one particularly as I read it, that how did she do that? Why could I not put that book down? Why did I feel like I was there in those New York society, turn of the century? So every single book I read, I learn something from it. And that's the wonder. There's so many books to be reading. So I'm learning all the time as a writer. And I'm doing the same thing with my children's series. I'm reading so many books at the moment written for children to learn from, especially in Australia, because there's so many brilliant children's writers. So I've been reading Jacqueline Harvey's books, Melina Marchetta's new series about a little girl called Zola, to learn how to do it. And it's not plagiarism, but it's it's like if I was a filmmaker and talking to you about my new film rather than my new book, which I've knocked over. Go nice and neat. Then I would watch a lot of films to learn, and it's the same for a writer, I think. So thank you for your question. Now, have we time for one more, Tim? It might be the last one. Yes. Do you have tips for future writers? Hello, Darla. Is it Darla or Daria? Apologies, my glasses aren't the strongest. I do have tips for future writers. They are simple. It's 3 tips. Read, as I've just been saying. Read as much as you can. That's where you'll learn. That's where your brain will get your imagination into gear, because you'll read something and that might give you a spark of an idea for your own story. Write. The main tip for being a writer is you have to write. Again, if we were filmmakers or a musician or we were sports people talking now, not authors and readers, that's how you learn to do what you want to do to love writing, to see how it's done technically, is by watching it. So lots and lots of writing, and it won't work it won't always work. My books never are perfect. Well, they're not perfect at the end, but there's definitely not perfect at the first draft. But you can't edit if you haven't written something. So you've got to take it seriously, and set yourself a deadline, and care about it. And start with short stories, start with a novel. So it's read, write, and then my third tip is edit. As I said, it'll never be perfect the first time, but you'll always make it better by going over it and over it. Leave it for a little while, come back and look at it again. But that's my 3 tenets actually of writing, and that's what keeps me buoyed all the time. So read, write, edit. Thank you. And the last question for tonight. Hello, Sue. Hi, Monica. Beside the kids' books, what's next for you? Oh, thank you, Sue. I am in the early stages of my 14th book, which will be my 13th novel, and it's the daydreaming stage, actually. So I know who the characters are. They're all set to go, and I know what happens to them. In terms of what's going to set off this explosion in this family, but I don't know what happens next. But I've been doing lots of daydreaming about them and this family, and who the tensions are, and who doesn't get on with who, and who's got dark secrets, and who's telling lies, etc. And I can't wait to get cracking on that. So I mean, it's fantastic. I said today's publication day for the Godmothers, so I'm going to enjoy talking about the Godmothers for a month. I'm doing lots of events like this online, and then in-person events here in South Australia, where thankfully it's possible. And just to say, yeah, my heart's going out to all of you in Melbourne and Victoria. I'd love to be coming to see you all there, and I hope you're all holding steady with that tough time you're all having, and that books are keeping you all distracted and entertained. But yeah, as soon as I'm back home in Dublin again, hopefully in November, I'm going to start writing the second in my children's book series, and then get cracking on my new novel, because they'll be ready to go by then, I think. So thanks for the question, Sue. So I think I'll leave you all to go and have your dinner or a glass of wine or watch telly or whatever happens next. Thank you so much to Dymocks for not just supporting me with, the honour of getting to do a Chapter 1 event on launch day with the Godmothers, but all of you for all the wonderful messages you send me on Facebook. They keep me going when I'm writing one of my books, and for your questions tonight. And if I'm going to be anywhere you are in South Australia, do come along and say hello in person. But for now, thank you so much for listening and for reading my books, for letting me do what I love to do for 20 years. I still love it, and I couldn't do it without booksellers like Dymocks and without readers like you. So thanks very much, everybody. Thank you, Tim, also for looking after the technical sides, and happy reading, everybody.